why can't we have decent schools for all kids? This is something that's in all of our interest, and we ought to have them. And the idea that Arne Duncan, who was the head of the Chicago Public Schools for 7 years, and then head of the nation's schools for 7 years, and he goes back to Chicago and he can't find a single public school for his own kids, that's an absolute damning comment on school reform as we've lived it out for the last several decades. There's nothing magical about it, but we as a democracy, as a people, ought to say that whatever the privileged, the most privileged, and the wisest parents have for their children, we should demand for our community's children. So if the privileged people get 25 kids in a classroom, we want 25 kids in a classroom. If the privileged get full arts programs in their schools, we want all schools to have full arts programs. If the privileged don't have to take standardized tests every month and don't have to be subjected to the Common Core, why do other people's children have to be subjected to those things? We should demand, as a free people, that what they get, what Arne Duncan gets for his kids, we want for our kids. It's a simple kind of improvement. It's not utopian. It's within our reach. We can afford it. We should do it.
Why are the schools Bill Ayers asks so bad? Funding on American public schools has escalated fantastically. It has gone up many, many times from what it was, and yet the schools never seem to improve. And yet, we never see people like Jesse Jackson protesting outside the public schools, even though black kids can't get a good education seemingly anywhere in the whole city or in the whole state.
And I'm fascinated that Dinesh is against public schools. But public schools built this country in many ways, and we not only ought to have them, people in Winnetka, people in Grosse Pointe, they have public schools. They love their public schools. We ought to have more of them. What we're seeing right now in school reform is exactly what Dinesh describes as public education, which is entrepreneurs moving in, creating charter schools that are in many cases for profit, but they're all privately managed, and they're taking taxpayer money to do it. They're not actually doing anything entrepreneurial to build anything. They're taking taxpayer money to advance their own profits.
One way to really tackle this public school problem at the root would be for the government, based upon need, to take poor students and put into their hand real purchasing power. And so, for example, if it was parents and students who had that same $10,000 that the school may be spending, but now the money isn't given to the school, because the school has no incentive to spend it well, but it's given to the parent, it's given to the kid, so that the kid now can say, I don't like that school, it's doing a terrible job, and I can spend this money at a public or private school wherever I want. Suddenly the forces of competition come into play, just as the way that the post office has been radically improved in the last 20 years, thanks to the institution of Federal Express. Once there's competition, suddenly the government bureaucrats seem to realize their jobs are imperiled, and they begin to move a little faster.
I like your idea of choice. If you would say, next to this segregated poor school in the south side of Chicago, right next to it, you're going to build Sidwell Friends, or you're going to build the University of Chicago Lab School. And we'll just say to people, which one do you want? If that's the choice you're talking about, but you're saying they can go anywhere. They could go to Winnetka. How are they going to get to Winnetka?
They don't need to get to Winnetka, Bill, if there are large numbers of people in inner cities. If each of them had $10,000 of buying power,
10,000?
you can be very sure
Wait,
that
10,000?
a lot of entrepreneurs would be creating some very good schools in those
Not for
regions to compete
10,000.
for those dollars.
Not for 10,000, and you're asking the taxpayers to say they would back that because nobody else is going to do it, but you're not actually giving real choices. And we're seeing this right now with the charter movement. There's no choice between a great school and a crappy school. It's two crappy schools. In many ways, the charter schools have doubled down on the very things that make the failing schools fail. They've doubled down on drill and kill. They've doubled down on testing. They've doubled down on getting rid of the arts. Those are not things. If the privileged won't send their kids to that school, then that's not a good school.
Correct. So more money helps. Parental involvement also helps. High standards also help. Being able to fire teachers also helps. And so...
Wait a minute. Really? Firing bad teachers. I love this. Firing the bad teachers is what we need to do. If you say, and this is absolute orthodoxy among some people, the idea that it's the lazy, incompetent teachers that are driving the schools down. The reality is that in the whole school reform moment, short-termers who are doing a tourist duty in the inner city, these are the people who are terrible teachers. We need veteran teachers who see teaching as a career. If I said, instead of saying we need to get rid of the lazy, incompetent teachers, if I said every kid deserves a caring, intellectually grounded, well-paid, well-rested teacher in the classroom, I hope you'd agree with that too.